Oral questions, questions orales. The honourable member for Carleton.
Yesterday, the clerk of the Privy Council admitted that at a September 17th meeting, the Attorney General told the Prime Minister that she had decided not to overturn the prosecutor's decision and give SNC-Lavalin a deal to avoid trial. That was the course of justice. Yet, the Prime Minister sent his top bureaucrat and then separately his top advisor to change that decision and alter the course of justice. When she refused, she was fired. Why?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, yesterday also at Justice Committee, the Clerk of the Privy Council confirmed that at, quote, every opportunity, verbally and in writing, in December, the Prime Minister made it clear that this was a decision for the Minister of Justice to take. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Carleton.
He said, no pressure. We'll fire you if you don't do what we say, but no pressure. The decision is entirely yours. Here is the chronology we now know. The Attorney General told the Prime Minister on September 17th that she would not push for a special deal for SNC-Lavalin. Yet he sent his top advisor on December 5th and his top bureaucrat on December 19th to change her mind. When she didn't, she was moved out of the position. Why did the government and the Prime Minister attempt to change the course of justice in this case?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Madam Speaker, the Justice Committee has been working together, members on both sides, to have witnesses appear. Members on both sides are asking questions. Witnesses are answering those questions. That member chooses to continue speculating and drawing his own conclusions, but we on this side, we have confidence in the work of members of the committee. We are the government that increased resources for committees so that they could do this important work. And it's fascinating to me that the member seems to have no regard for the work of the committee because they're doing that work. He was there asking for witnesses to appear, and now that they are, he seems to be undermining them.
The honourable member for Carleton.
I'm simply drawing facts from that very committee. We know the Prime Minister found out from his Attorney General that she would not give SNC-Lavalin a special deal. That set in place the course of justice. Yet the Prime Minister then sent his top advisor to meet with her at the Chateau Laurier Lounge, and then his top bureaucrat to call her over the phone to try and change that course of justice. When she refused, he removed her from her position. Why did the Prime Minister attempt to defeat the course of justice in this case?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, that is not evidence. That is the member's speculation. That is the member drawing his own conclusions. And this is exactly why Canadians are finding it challenging. Canadians should have confidence in their institutions. And that's why we will not undermine the work of committees. We will not undermine the work of offices of Parliament. We respect the independent judicial system because Canadians should have and can have confidence in these independent bodies because Canadians should know that the members of Parliament are asking tough questions to witnesses. Witnesses are appearing and answering those questions. Thank you.
I want to remind members that heckling is not permitted and to wait their turn to be called in order to speak. The
Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Madam Speaker, on September 4th, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions informed SNC-Lavalin that they would be proceeding with criminal charges. On the 17th, the former Attorney General told the Prime Minister that she would not interfere. We now know that the Clerk of the Privy Council and the Prime Minister tried to interfere on several occasions to get the Attorney General to intervene. Madam Speaker, as I said earlier, members of the Justice Committee do their work. They ask to have witnesses appear. Those witnesses appeared yesterday. Those meetings will continue next week. But let's just look at the facts. The Director of the Public Prosecution Services said that all prosecutors, all the time, provide their advice and make their decisions independently. There was no direct communication. The honourable member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Well, Madam Speaker, Section 139 of the Criminal Code states that everyone who willfully attempts in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice is guilty of an indictable offence. The law is clear, and it's unacceptable that the Clerk of the Privy Council tried to make the former Attorney General intervene in the judicial process. When will they realize that their actions are an obstruction of justice and a crime? Once again, Madam Speaker, yesterday at the Justice Committee, the clerk also confirmed that at every opportunity, the Prime Minister made it very clear that this was a decision to be taken by the Minister of Justice. And I would just like to point out that in French, this member says that he has no intention of harming jobs for the SNC-Lavalin. That's what he said. But in English, the member for Carleton said that he wants to put an end to this business. So they're continuing with their doublespeak, and they have to stop. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For the honourable member for Victoria.
Madam Speaker, when the former Attorney General was fired, she emphasized the need for an independent judicial system. Why? When the Prime Minister's chief advisor, Jerry Butts, resigned, he highlighted the former Attorney General. Why? When the former Attorney General stood here in this House this week, and she asked to be allowed to do what? To speak her truth. Why? Why won't the Prime Minister let her speak her truth and let Canadians get to the bottom of all of this?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, as the honourable member full well knows, matters of solicitor-client privilege are exceptionally complex, particularly in this sort of case. We are working, Madam Speaker, to try to find a way such that that the former Attorney General can in fact speak, and we are doing our level best to do that.
Madam Speaker, 50 meetings.
The member has to wait till he is recognized. The honourable member for Victoria.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. 50 meetings between executives of a company and at the highest levels of the Liberal government. An engineering company meeting about what? Oh, and justice issues. Time that the Prime Minister could have been spent finding real solutions to our housing crisis, to making medication more inexpensive for Canadians, and helping the half of people in this country who are only $200 away from being able to pay their bills. When this Liberal government has a rich friend knocking at the door, boy, do they find time to meet them. But when Canadians need help, they're told to wait. Why won't they just come clean and tell us who they're really working for?
Well, there you go.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Canadians can have confidence that this government will always fight for Canadians. Canadians can have confidence in their institutions. I find it fascinating that the member seems to forget that the company actually met with their leader, the leader of the NDP as well. No differently did the company meet with the leader of the Conservatives. What I also find fascinating, as he provides his commentary, is yesterday he was on a panel with other members of the committee, and he was saying, why don't you have confidence in the members of the Justice Committee? We do, Madam Speaker. Let them do their work. Thank you.
The honourable member for Drummond. Madam Speaker, families, young people and seniors are trying to pay their bills. They are dealing with the very high costs of housing, health care and child care. They're wondering why the Prime Minister is not doing everything he can to improve their lives rather than bending over backwards to help the rich. When rich executives ask for help, well, the Liberals are quick to act fast. But when people need help, they're told to wait. Why are there two sets of rules? One set for the rich and another one for the rest of us? The Honourable Minister of Families and Social Development. Yes, there are two rules. One that increases taxes for the wealthy, and the other rule of reducing taxes for the middle class. and stopping sending checks to millionaires who don't need it, helping the families, helping children be lifted out of poverty. Unfortunately, the opposition voted against all these rules. The honourable member for Drummond. Madam Speaker, if the Liberal government was sincerely concerned about protecting workers and their jobs, then were they for the Sears workers, for the Rona workers, for the Davie Shipyard workers? Their record speaks for itself. They're helping rich business execs, and workers have to make do themselves. Under the Liberal government, there are two sets of rules, one set for the rich and another for the rest of us. Rather than help their friends bend the rules, why don't they truly defend workers when they've been abandoned? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Our government feels that Canadians deserve peace of mind during their retirement, and the government, with their platform over the past 3 years, have created more than 800,000 jobs. The unemployment level is the lowest in decades, and our government continues to work to create good jobs for Canadians, for families, in order so that they can have a secure life.
For burying this bill.
On September 4th, the Director of Public Prosecutions refused to offer a deferred prosecution agreement to SNC-Lavalin. On September 17th, the Attorney General said she would not reverse that decision. During the next several months, a concerted effort was made by the Prime Minister and his senior officials to make her change her mind. The criminal code is clear. Everyone who willfully attempts in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice is guilty of an indictable offense. With everything we now know, how is this not obstruction of justice by the Prime Minister?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, let's look at the record. Just last week, the Director of Public Prosecution Service confirmed that prosecutors in every case exercise their discretion independently and free from any political or partisan consideration. Yesterday, the Deputy Minister of Justice confirmed that there was no direct communication in any specific case between the PMO and the DPP. The Clerk of the Privy Council also confirmed that at every opportunity, verbally and in writing, in December, the Prime Minister made it clear that the Minister of Justice would take the decision. The decision was for the Minister of Justice to take.
The Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Well, let's look at the record. Section 139(2) of the Criminal Code says that everyone who willfully attempts in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice is guilty of an indictable offence. The Clerk of the Privy Council admitted that he, the Prime Minister's staff, and the Prime Minister himself all attempted to influence the outcome of the SNC trial. That is a criminal offence. When will the Liberals admit that?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I'll quote once again. Just last week, the Director of the Public Prosecution Service confirmed that prosecutors in every case exercise their discretion independently and free from any political or partisan consideration. Yesterday, when asked at Justice Committee, would it be appropriate for the Prime Minister and officials to discuss the matter with the Attorney General confirmed those kinds of conversations would be appropriate. Madam Speaker, I encourage members opposite to stop speculating. The Justice Committee is doing their work. They're bringing forward witnesses. They're working hard. Let's let them do their work. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Madam Speaker, the Liberal saga continues. Here are the facts. On September 4th, the Office of the Director of the Public Prosecution Service informed SNC-Lavalin that they would be going ahead with the trial. On September 17th, the former Attorney General told the Prime Minister that she would not interfere in the criminal trial. Yesterday, the Clerk of the Privy Council admitted that on several occasions the Prime Minister attempted to interfere with this process. That's a crime, Madam Speaker. When will the Liberals admit it? The Honourable Government House Leader. Madam Speaker, once again, I would encourage all members of Parliament and all Canadians to listen closely to the words of the witnesses who are appearing before the Justice Committee. Now let's look at the facts. The Director of the Public Prosecution Service confirmed that in every case, prosecutors exercise their discretion independently. The Assistant Deputy Minister confirmed that there is no direct communication in any specific case between the Cabinet and the Director of Public Prosecutions. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Madam Speaker, Canadians want to know. The Prime Minister is having problems with his exes. His ex-Attorney General wants to speak her truth. His ex-Principal Advisor wants to keep quiet. Madam Speaker, the pressure put on the former Attorney General by the Prime Minister's office breaches Section 139 of the Criminal Code. When will the Liberals realize that this is an obstruction of justice? This is a crime. This is a scandal.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, it's very important that Canadians have confidence in their institutions, and that is exactly why the Justice Committee members have worked together, members on both sides of the aisle, to invite witnesses who came. Members asked questions, and the witnesses answered those questions. We have confidence in the work of the Justice Committee members, and I think they have to be left to do their work. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Alderman Norfolk.
Well, Madam Speaker, the Criminal Code states that any attempt to obstruct a judicial proceeding is a crime. September 4th, SNC-Lavalin learned that their criminal trial would go forward. On September 17th, the former AG told the PM that she would not interfere in the trial. And now we've learned that 3 months later, the PM's principal secretary and the clerk of the Privy Council continued to have discussions with her about interfering. Madam Speaker, is it ignorance or arrogance that keeps the Liberals from realizing just how much this looks like obstruction of justice?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I have stated for the record, and I'll do again, that the Clerk of the Privy Council also confirmed that at every opportunity, verbally and in writing, in December, the Prime Minister made it clear that this was a decision for the Minister of Justice to take. Madam Speaker, we take seriously the responsibility of standing up for jobs and growing the economy. We will always defend and uphold the principles of the judicial independence and the rule of law. This matter is being looked at by the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner and the Justice Committee. We will work with them. We think they should get to do their work independently of this chamber. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Haliburton, Kawartha Lake, Brock.
Madam Speaker, Section 139(2) of the Criminal Code states that everyone who willfully attempts, Madam Speaker, in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice is guilty of an indictable offence. The Clerk of the Privy Council, Speaker, admitted that he, the Prime Minister's staff, and the Prime Minister himself all attempted to influence the outcome of the SNC-Lavalin trial. That is a criminal offence. When will the Liberals admit that?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, as I have said, that we on this side of the aisle, the Liberal Party, we support the work of the committee. We support the independence of committees. That's exactly why, as a government, we increase the resources of committees, because we know that they need to do that important work. We know that the matter is being looked at by the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner and the Justice Committee. So when it comes to officers of Parliament, we respect their independence, and we believe they should do the important work. We respect the independence of the judicial system, Madam Speaker. A clear difference between the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party is that we will not undermine our institutions like they choose to continue doing. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Desnepe, Mississippi, Churchill.
Madam Speaker, people in Pelican Narrows are suffering from a lack of affordable and accessible housing. The community has 266 new housing requests, but only the funding to complete 3. And that's not including the requests for home renovations. While the Liberals brag about their housing strategy, people in Pelican Narrows are still waiting for a place to call home. They cannot and should not wait any longer. Will the Liberals stop waiting and immediately invest in housing for the people of Pelican Narrows?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our government recognizes the unacceptable gaps in housing on reserve and in Indigenous communities. After decades of neglect and underfunding by the Conservative government, our government is taking action. For First Nations housing on reserve alone, we have committed more than $1 billion, with more than 15,000 housing units being built and renovated. We've also rolled out as distinctions-based housing for Indigenous communities, 600,000 for First Nations, 600 million for First Nations, 500 million for Métis, and 400 million for Inuit.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, I do apologize. The honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Liberals don't seem to understand that reconciliation means housing is a human right. This week they announced funding that represents less than 2% of their national housing strategy to tackle the homelessness crisis of Indigenous people in urban centres. Experts have been clear we need way more than that to address this urgent housing crisis and to solve the fundamental causes of homelessness in urban areas. 1 in 15 Indigenous peoples living in cities are homeless. When will this Liberal government step up with a real plan to address this crisis?
The Honourable Minister of Families, Children and Social Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The very difficult circumstances in which many Canadians, and certainly many Indigenous Canadians, find themselves when it comes to finding an affordable place to call home is something of great concern to this government and has been so since the very start of our mandate. That's why in budget in 2016, for the first time in 17 years, we increased the budget to fight homelessness in Canada, and we doubled it. And that's not the end of the story, because just a few months ago we launched the first ever national housing strategy, which is going to change the way in which Indigenous Canadians across all Canada will be able to access a safe and affordable place to call home.
For Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. According to the Criminal Code, everyone who willfully attempts in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice in a judicial proceeding is guilty of a crime. We now know that the clerk of the Privy Council and the Prime Minister's top advisor attempted to force the former Attorney General to interfere with the criminal trial of SNC-Lavalin after she told the Prime Minister she would not. The Prime Minister is complicit in these actions. When will the Liberals admit their crimes?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
One of the newer members to that side and already speculating just like the rest of them. That member should be encouraged to let the Justice Committee do the important work. The Justice Committee has members from both sides that are on that committee. They are working together to bring witnesses to that committee. Witnesses are appearing, members are asking tough questions, they're getting answers. We on this side, we have confidence in the work that committees do in this place and will continue to do that. But we should let the record show that just last week, the Director of Public Prosecution Service confirmed that prosecutors in every case exercise their discretion independently and free from any political or partisan interference. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I do want to remind the members again that when somebody else has the floor, they should be listening to the answer to the question that that party has just asked. The honourable member for Bow River.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Criminal Code is clear. Everyone who attempts in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice is guilty of an indictable offence. The public prosecutor informed SNC-Lavalin they would be proceeding with a criminal trial. The Attorney General said she would not interfere. We know the PMO, the Clerk of the Privy Council, even the Prime Minister attempted on several occasions to get the former Attorney General to interfere in the trial. Is this not obstruction of justice, Madam Speaker?
The Honourable Leader of the Government.
I hope Canadians are noticing that the Conservatives continue asking the exact same question, and when providing an answer, they start yelling. So they can never hear the answer, and then they keep continuing getting up and asking the same question. So I'll answer it again and maybe they'll listen. Just last week, the Director of Public Prosecution Service confirmed that prosecutors in every case exercise their discretion independently and free from any political or partisan consideration. Yesterday, the Deputy Minister of Justice confirmed that there is no direct communication in any specific case between the PMO and the DPP. Once again, they don't listen. They continue speaking when I have the floor. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le Madam Speaker, on September 4th, the SNC-Lavalin company was informed that the trial would go ahead. We now know that there are people in the government who tried to interfere. Under Section 139 of the Criminal Code, everyone who willfully attempts in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice is guilty of an indictable offence. When will the Liberals realize that this is obstruction of justice? The Honourable Government House Leader. The same question again in French, but we are very proud of being a bilingual country, so I'll say it again. The Director of Public Prosecution, the Public Prosecution Service, confirmed that in every case, prosecutors exercise their discretion independently. The Deputy Minister also confirmed that there is no direct communication in any case between the Prime Minister's office and the Director of Public Prosecutions. And the Clerk of the Privy Council stated that at every opportunity, the Prime Minister has made it clear that this is a decision for the Minister of Justice to make. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Well, Madam Speaker, I know that the Liberals are very uncomfortable with this very inconvenient truth, but let's repeat. Section 139(2) of the Criminal Code says that everyone who willfully attempts in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice is guilty of an indictable offence. We know that the Clerk of the Privy Council, the Prime Minister, and Jerry Butts willfully attempted to have the former Attorney General interfere in the trial. That is a criminal offence. Will the Justice Minister admit that this constitutes a crime?
The Honourable Leader of the Government.
Madam Speaker, that member was here under 10 years of Stephen Harper when they undermined the work of committees. What's clear is the Conservatives have chosen a new leader, but their approach to democracy remains exactly the same, and Canadians are noticing. We on this side have increased resources to committees because we respect our institutions. Canadians should have confidence in their institutions, and that's what we'll continue to do. When it comes to officers of Parliament, this side will always respect their work. When it comes to the independent judicial system, Madam Speaker, we will encourage them to do their work. When it comes to the work of committees like the Justice Committee, they are doing their work. Let's let them do their work. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Once again, I remind the members not to be chatting or heckling while someone else has the floor. I'm sure they want to hear the answer. The Honourable Member for Courtenay Alberni.
Madam Speaker, for 20 years, many countries have tried to amend an international treaty to stop developed countries from shipping garbage to developing nations, but Canada has refused to agree. The Liberal government talks about increasing recycling, but it's clear they're not taking responsibility for where our garbage ends up. 103 containers of Canadian trash has been rotting in the Philippines for 4 years. These containers are full of not recycling, but diapers, food waste, and discarded electronics. When will the minister end this international embarrassment and prevent Canada from shipping our garbage to developing countries?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for raising this important question. Our country is strongly committed to collaborating with the Philippines government to resolve this issue and is aware of the court decision ordering the importer to ship the material back to Canada. Currently, a joint technical working group is being established consisting of officials from both countries to examine the full spectrum of issues related to the removal of the waste. In 2016, we actually amended our own regulations around hazardous waste shipments to prevent this kind of event from happening again, and we're committed to working collaboratively to ensure the material is processed in a more environmentally sustainable way.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Madam Speaker, for 8 months now, Trump has been holding companies hostage by imposing tariffs on steel and aluminum exports. But Russia asked the U.S. for dropping customs duties, and that was granted. So I wonder what the Liberals are doing on this file. In my riding, companies like Snock, Tuba, and Norbeck are being hard hit by the Liberals' NAFTA 2.0. It has consequences on companies back home, on workers, and on their families. What do the Liberals, in fact, have to say to people back home?
The Honourable Government Whip.
Merci, Madame le Président.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. U.S. tariffs must be lifted. Legislators in the U.S. have asked Ambassador Lighthouser to lift the tariffs, and on the weekend, the minister raised the issue with members of U.S. Congress, including Nancy Pelosi, who have confirmed the impact of our countermeasures. Our plan works. Recently, Carolyn Brady, Republican, stated that tariffs had to be lifted before Congress looks at the new NAFTA deal.
I apologize. It's the Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. He used to be the government whip. L'honorable député de Pontiac.
The Honourable Member.
Speaker, a recent article in the Globe and Mail made it clear that Canadian economists are virtually unanimous in the view that a price on pollution reduces greenhouse gas emissions at the lowest possible cost to the economy. They also went on to identify another fact, and I'll quote, "Under the federal policy that begins this spring, roughly 80% of households will receive rebates that actually exceed the amount they will pay." So, Madam Speaker, would the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment please clarify why Conservative politicians, not just these Conservative politicians, but others as well, are misrepresenting academic research and vastly overstating the costs for the average Canadian?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank the Honourable Member from Pontiac for his question and for his advocacy on the climate and environment files over these past few years. The fact is, climate change is real, and we have an opportunity and an obligation to do something about it. The opposition has been spending a lot of time misleading Canadians about our climate plan because, quite frankly, they don't have one of their own to talk about. We made a commitment to Canadians that we were going to take climate change seriously and do it in a way that makes life more affordable. We've established a plan that's going to put more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 families in jurisdiction where this plan applies. We're working with Canadians on the best ways to cut pollution, and we're going to take no lessons from the opposition, who have no plan on how to contribute to the fight against climate change.
The Honourable Member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Madam Speaker, Section 139, subsection 2 of the Criminal Code says that everyone who willfully attempts in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice is guilty of an indictable offence. We now know that the Prime Minister arranged for the Clerk of the Privy Council and his Principal Secretary to get the former Attorney General to interfere in the criminal prosecution of SNC-Lavalin. This was a sustained effort to avoid the trial. How are the actions, Madam Speaker, of the Prime Minister not criminal?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, we on this side will always defend and uphold the principles of judicial independence and the rule of law. And we know that this matter is being looked at by both the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner and the Justice Committee. Once again, Madam Speaker, we know that this matter is being looked at by the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner and the Justice Committee. We have confidence in our institutions. We have confidence in offices of Parliament. We have confidence in the independence of the judicial system. We believe that they should be able to do their work. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Madam Speaker, we've listened carefully to the Liberals since the start of the saga. Now, we know what the facts are. The Prime Minister's office, the clerk, and even the Prime Minister on several occasions tried to get the former Attorney General to intervene. Now, Section 139 of the Criminal Code is clear. Everyone who willfully attempts in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice is guilty of an indictable offence. Madam Speaker, what is the Prime Minister waiting for to acknowledge that he willfully obstructed justice? The Honourable Government House Leader. Madam Speaker, as I said in English, I will repeat in French. This matter is currently before the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner and the Committee of Justice. I hope he will listen carefully because I've been giving the same answer since the start of question period. We know that the Justice Committee has called witnesses. We know that witnesses on both sides are asking questions. Witnesses are answering the questions. The Commissioner and the Committee must do their jobs, and we would encourage them to complete it.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, on September 4, the Office of the Public Prosecutor informed SNC-Lavalin that they would be moving forward with their criminal trial. On September 17, the former Attorney General told the Prime Minister that she would not interfere in the criminal trial. That should have been the end. But after that meeting, the clerk of the Privy Council and the Prime Minister's principal secretary tried to get the former Attorney General to interfere in the trial. When will this Prime Minister realize that this obstruction of justice is a criminal offense?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Madam Speaker, just last week, the Director of the Public Prosecution Service confirmed that prosecutors in every case exercise their discretion independently and free from any political or partisan consideration. Yesterday, the Deputy Minister of Justice confirmed that there is no direct communication in any specific case between the PMO and the DPP. The Clerk of the Privy Council also confirmed that at every opportunity, verbally and in writing, in December, the Prime Minister made it clear that this was the decision for the Minister of Justice to make. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Section 139(2) of the Criminal Code says that everyone who willfully attempts in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice is guilty of an indictable offence. The Clerk of the Privy Council has confessed that he and the Prime Minister's staff and the Prime Minister himself have all attempted to influence the course of the SNC-Lavalin trial. If the Liberals believe they've done nothing wrong, why was the former Attorney General fired, and why did Jerry Butts resign?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, so when it comes to the Prime Minister's former Principal Secretary, he has issued a public letter. He has made that letter available for all Canadians to read and hear his reasons. When it comes to the committee, the Justice Committee has asked for witnesses to appear. Members from both sides of the aisle have worked together to have those witnesses appear. We know that witnesses are appearing, members are asking questions. We think the committee should do their important work. Members opposite choose to speculate. We are a fact-based government. We will let the facts speak for themselves. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kootenay, Columbia.
Madam Speaker, with the high cost of loans, daycare and rent, many young Canadians are finding it extremely difficult to achieve the dream of home ownership. Through a series of rule changes by the former Conservative government, the maximum term for insured mortgages went from 40 years to 25 years. And instead of making it easier for first-time home buyers, Liberals further tightened mortgage rules. This is the same old story. While they make life easier for corporate friends, Liberals are shutting out young families from owning their own homes. Will the Liberal government put young families first and commit to introducing a 30-year term on insured mortgages?
Good question.
Secrétaire parlementaire du Ministre.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. We know that for many Canadians, the investment in a house is one of the largest investments they make in their life, and we know it's so essential for this investment to be well protected, and that is why we have taken steps to limit risks on the market and to focus on long-term access to financing. We are giving more tools to families, to people in need, in order to enable them to have financial prosperity and stability. The Honourable Member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. Thank you, Madam Speaker. This week, 9 men were executed in Egypt following a grossly unfair trial.
Executions reflect the serious worsening of the human rights situation in Egypt, where the government is cracking down on human rights activists, journalists, members of the LGBTQ community, and basically anyone who dares publicly criticize Egypt's military dictatorship. When will the minister break her silence and exert pressure on Egyptian authorities to uphold human rights and the rule of law?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Canada is concerned by the escalation of tensions in Egypt. We've been alarmed by the reaction of security forces during recent peaceful demonstrations and the recent arrests of activists and politicians. We call on all parties in Egypt to exercise restraint, denounce hateful speech, and engage in peaceful dialogue. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Madam Speaker, I just finished a tour of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and I heard disappointment from so many. Construction camps were abandoned. We had massive piles of pipe just waiting to be installed. The First Nations entrepreneurs were losing money, and planned projects were put on hold because of this Prime Minister's mistakes. After paying $4.6 billion, $1 billion over the sticker price, my constituents need reassurance that there will be shovels in the ground before October 2019. Running out the clock is not an option.
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire pour le ministre.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Our government has been steadfast in its commitment to do the hard work necessary to move forward in the right way on TMX by following the guidance from the Federal Court of Appeal. Today, the National Energy Board will release its reconsideration report, and that marks an important milestone. We continue to do the work in consulting with First Nations, ensuring that where accommodations are possible and reasonable, that we will do so. At this moment, we have around 8 teams on the ground meeting with the communities, as well as over 80. We have over 80 meetings with the communities as we move forward in this project in the right way.
The honourable member for Brandon Souris.
Madam Speaker, last weekend, hundreds of workers gathered on the prairies in support of new construction for new pipelines. They're fed up with the Liberal excuses. They gathered because they don't want to hear any more of their Liberal excuses. They don't want the procrastination to continue, and they cannot afford the Prime Minister's mistakes. So if the Liberals won't listen to us about killing their anti-pipeline Bill C-69, will they at least listen to the tens of thousands of energy workers who want this bill killed and stopped immediately?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Following the clear path provided by the Federal Court of Appeal in order to move in the right way through meaningful consultations. The Court was clear that we needed to do a better job consulting Indigenous people, something that the Conservatives ignored for 10 years. And then we needed to account for the impact of marine shipping. That is the path that we are taking. We are taking the time, and we are not cutting corners to get this right like the Conservatives did. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Bravo.
The honourable member for Foothills.
Madam Speaker, every single week an energy company is laying off hundreds of workers or leaving the country altogether. And every week we get inaction and platitudes by the Prime Minister. This week, Steelhead LNG has shelved its pipeline in BC, and Devon Energy has announced it is selling its Canadian assets and exiting the country. Why, when it comes to 120,000 unemployed energy workers or a convoy of Canadians who come to Ottawa and fight for their jobs, will this Prime Minister not lift a finger? Why will he not fight for everyone?
Here, here. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Madam Speaker, after 10 years of inaction under Stephen Harper, 99% of our oil exports were still sold to the United States. Their approach failed, and they're doubling down on that approach with their disregards for the courts, no plan to protect the environment and coastal communities, and with no plan to meaningfully engage in a two-way dialogue with Indigenous peoples. They disregard the courts. We are following the path that has been provided by the Federal Court of Appeal, and we're going to do so in the right way.
The Honourable Member for Laval-Les-Îles. Madam Speaker, February 12th was the International Day Against the Use of Child Soldiers. This day was an opportunity to remember that we must always protect children from the risk of participating in the horrors of armed conflict. Can the Minister of National Defence inform the House of progress achieved by our government as part of the initiative launched by Romeo Dallaire to put an end to the use of child soldiers, and in light of our recommitment with the United Nations?
Of National Defence.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank the Member of Parliament from Laval-Les-Îles for the question and his hard work. In 2017, we launched the Vancouver Principles on Peacekeeping and the Prevention of the Recruitment and the Use of Child Soldiers, developed alongside the Romeo Dallaire Child Soldiers Initiative. Earlier this month, I attended a workshop with more than 120 member states and international partners that will provide practical advice on how to train forces on peacekeeping operations and how to best support them when they come home. The Vancouver Principles, which have the support of 71 states, are a clear example of how our government is re-engaging with the United Nations and promoting peace and security around the world. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Madam Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has confirmed what veterans knew and what this Liberal Prime Minister denied. The Pension for Life scheme falls so short of what veterans were promised, it's reprehensible to Canadians. The report sent a shudder throughout the veterans community by revealing our most severely and permanently injured will receive on average $300,000 less under the Liberal pension scam. Why must Canada's most vulnerable injured soldiers and their families pay for this Prime Minister's mistakes?
Hear, hear.
Minister of National Defence and Veterans Affairs.
Madam Speaker, our government is committed to ensuring our veterans receive the benefits and support that they deserve. The needs of Canada's veterans have changed significantly over the past 100 years since the Pension Act was introduced, and our support needs to change with it, Madam Speaker. Thanks to our government's $10 billion investments, all veterans today, including the most vulnerable, are better off than they were under the Harper Conservatives. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Speaker, I hope that all members of the House saw last week's report that showed that over the past 20 years, more than 600 people in 30 different sports were victims of abuse.
We need to stand up as a country, united in ending abuse, discrimination, and harassment in sport. Est-ce que le ministre de Sciences et de
Can the Minister for Science and Sport update this House on what our government is doing to put an end to this problem that affects so many Canadians?
L'honorable ministre des Sciences et des Sports.
The Honourable Minister. I'd like to thank my colleague. This has been my priority since I became Minister for Sport.
We announced strong measures to end abuse, discrimination, harassment in sport. Last week, sport ministers from across the country signed a declaration that will create a systemic culture shift in sport. And yesterday, I announced development of a universal code of conduct, which our sport partners like CAUSE said they were thrilled to see. Nous devons
We must put an end to abuse.
The honourable member for Durham.
Today, SNC-Lavalin reported billions in losses and said this was attributable to the dispute with Saudi Arabia. The company and senior Liberal officials ramped up their lobbying efforts last year at the same time this government was having their Twitter dispute with Saudi Arabia. So, did the Liberals bow to corporate pressure because their foreign policy failures were leading to billions in losses?
The Honourable Minister of International Development.
The company is doing business right around the world, and in conducting that business, employing many thousands of Canadians, and that's very important economic development. You also know that we have embarked on a very aggressive trade diversification strategy, and we meet with companies around the world to take best advantage of that. We believe that Canada is better positioned now to be a leader in international trade than it ever has been before.
Good job. The honourable member for Regina Louvain.
Madam Speaker, the misconduct of a Canadian company abroad has recently created some political controversy. More than a year ago, the government announced a Canadian ombudsperson for responsible enterprise to investigate such conduct. Unfortunately, no ombudsperson has been appointed. When asked yesterday, the minister said the appointment will be announced soon. Can the government commit to appoint an ombudsperson before this House rises this spring?
The Honourable Minister of International Diversification
Speaker, we know
and
that,
Development.
the protection of human rights abroad and Canada's commitment within its corporate community to behave in the absolute best of ethical standards is a value that all members of this House share. We also know that we are going to appoint the first ever ombudsperson for corporate social responsibility, and as I said yesterday, that appointment will be announced soon.
L'honorable député de Joliette.
The Honourable Member for Joliette. Madam Speaker, what a hassle to develop public transit in Quebec because of the federal government. Quebec City now is unable to build its tramway because Ottawa has single-handedly determined what infrastructure projects it would finance. And it's not possible to get money under any other programs because Ottawa is imposing conditions. We've got money, we collect half your taxes, but you don't meet criteria 2 in subsection 4. Why doesn't the government simply transfer the infrastructure money fully to Quebec?
The
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm very pleased to have an opportunity to remind my colleague that in the public transit agreement with Quebec, $5 billion will go to Quebec. It represents 26% of the total envelope when the percentage of the province is 23%. This is the largest transfer because there are significant requirements for public transit. We are present, and we are present for this federal funding. The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Madam Speaker, public transit is a perfect example of just how out of touch the federal government is with the reality in Quebec, be it Saguenay, Longueuil, Trois-Rivières. All of these cities have infrastructure projects, but the federal government is based on current use rates of transit. But guess what? When the service isn't up to par, people don't use it. The bus has to go by for people to get on it. Why doesn't the federal government simply transfer the infrastructure money to Quebec, and then we'll figure things out on our own?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities.
Madame la Présidente, comme nous avons...
Madam Speaker, as we've said on several occasions and confirmed, we will be there for the tramway. We have devoted some $1 billion to the project. In the meantime, we will continue to support priorities on behalf of the people of Quebec. The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Madam Speaker, the uncertainty surrounding the government's intentions regarding SNC-Lavalin is having real consequences. Today, the company announced $1.6 billion in losses in the last quarter. At this pace, a fire sale or massive layoff seem inevitable. The government must take action. It's urgent. A remediation agreement would make it possible to punish those who are guilty instead of collectively punishing workers who've done nothing wrong. What is the government waiting for to undertake negotiations? And what about the thousands of people who are about to lose their jobs? The Honourable Minister of Justice. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her question. As she knows, and as I reiterated yesterday in the House, as well as outside of the House, this is a delicate matter in that, as Attorney General, I cannot speak to an issue that may have an impact on something that is before the courts, and that is the case here.